The Philadelphia 76ers are riding a two-game win streak after their impressive team win over the Dallas Mavericks. They now have two matchups against the Brooklyn Nets and Memphis Grizzlies, which are prime opportunities to rip off two more wins and continue their spot in the standings. But today I want to talk a little bit about their roster as a whole, that this team has showed an impressive commitment to continuing to improve around the margins. We've talked plenty about guys like Buddy Hield, guys like Kyle Lowry that are win-now factors with this team, but I've been equally impressed with the Sixers' just ability to pay attention and their commitment to rebuilding the bottom of the roster, most specifically talking about the two-way contracts and some of the young guys that they are bringing in rotating out. Now, at the top of the list that I want to bring up today is Jeff Dowtin Jr. That I know I dropped a video the other day discussing the Sixers cutting Kenny Lofton Jr. and adding Jeff Dowtin Jr. to that two-way slot here. And I want to talk a little more about Jeff Dowtin specifically because I went back, watched some tape of him this weekend, and was a little bit more impressed with his game than I initially was on my kind of opening statements with him. That I will say, for the times that I've checked down in the G League, Dowtin Jr. has not been a guy that has stood out specifically to me in each situation. That I was walked away very impressed with guys like Terquavion Smith, Ricky Council IV, even Kenny Lofton I thought has had his moments. Darius Bazley has had his opportunities. But Jeff Dowtin Jr. has not quite been a guy that has stood out, but I do have a little bit of renewed optimism. So I want to dive into a little bit about who he is and what he brings to this team. So I'm going to start with this article here from Matt Murphy, who does some awesome work with the Sixers and Bluecoats, the Bluecoats announcer on the mic, and just a really nice guy as a whole. So he writes this about Dowtin. The 26-year-old Dowtin stands 6'3" and hails from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Dowtin played collegiately at the University of Rhode Island from 2016 to 2020. He played for now UConn head coach Dan Hurley during his first two seasons at URI, and the team went to the NCAA tournament both years. In an upset win over 6-seed Creighton in 2017 NCAA tournament, Dowtin scored 23 points with 10 of 10 at the free throw line as a true freshman. His first professional season was the 2021 NBA G League bubble season, at which he helped the then Lakeland, now Osceola Magic, defeat the Bluecoats in the finals. Trevelyan Queen, former Sixers legend, was also a member of that team and played very well in that finals as well. Dowtin has played in 34 career NBA games with the Golden State Warriors, Milwaukee Bucks, Orlando Magic, and Toronto Raptors. 25 of his 34 games came with the Raptors last season. He played 10 minutes per game for now 76ers head coach Nick Nurse. He scored an NBA career-high 10 points for the Raptors against Brooklyn on November 23, 2022 in Toronto in 100 total G League games over the past 3+ seasons, including the Showcase Cup and 21-22 NBA G League Ignite Tour. Dowtin holds averages of 16.6 points and 5.8 assists, while shooting better than 40% from beyond the three-point arc. The Bluecoats acquired Dowtin's G League player rights this past fall in exchange for the rights to Mac McClung. In 16 regular season games with the Bluecoats, Dowtin is averaging 18.1 points, 3.1 rebounds, and a team-leading 5.9 assists per contest. He leads the G League in assist-to-turnover ratio with 4.3. He also scored a season-high 32 points on January 27th against the Wisconsin Herd. So a lot that was just thrown out there, but some good bullet points for what he brings. I'll say the decision-making is the biggest thing that stands out to me, and I think a driving force in why Nick Nurse brought him to the Sixers team. That there's obviously a connection there, that he's played Dowtin before, knows his game from their time together, each of them with the Raptors, and now this is a guy that Nurse is showing a little trust in. That in every general manager and head coach situation, there's always a little give and take on you get your guys, let me bring in, I like this guy, he wants this guy, and this feels like an opportunity in which Nurse is working with Morey and vouching for Jeff Dowtin Jr. specifically. Now, I do want to mention, kind of throwing back, that I do have my first memories of Jeff Dowtin Jr. watching in a Rhode Island jersey. I was trying really hard to kind of come up with a player comp for an NBA guy for him. The closest I've gotten to is probably Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves right now. Just the way that Dowtin moves, there is a little burst. There's a little bit of hesitation. It's not quite like the level of like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with the tempo and pace that he plays with, but there's a little bit of kind of that stutter step nature. Shake Milton had it a little bit as well, where that would be a strength I would consider of his game, is his pace of play and the tempo, the change of pace is something that he really controls the game with that. So to dive into his time at University of Rhode Island, I do think this was a large reason why he went undrafted, is you can see some statistical regression going from his junior to senior year, from 15.3 points per game to 13.9 points per game. The assist dropped as well, 3.7 to 3.2. The rebounds across the board going down here, and that is not because of minutes. As 36.6 to 35.6. Yes, one less minute per game, but that should not be something leading to this type of drop-off. And the shooting percentage as well, that from the field going from 47.5% dropped down to 42.9%. and the three-point numbers were fine, 36%, which is about his career average of 36.1%, but the efficiency obviously took a hit because of this. To touch a little bit on his G League stats, I know a ton was thrown out in those bullet points here, but I did just want to pull up specifically this year with the Delaware Bluecoats in 32.4 minutes per game, averaging 18.4 points, 5.5 assists, 3.1 rebounds, 1.1 steal, shooting 37.9% from three. His three-point numbers have increased at the G League level, shooting 41.2% from his career and over 50% from the field overall, which is impressive stuff and really good efficiency for a guard. Anywhere above that 50% number is really appealing, specifically for a guy that is 6'3", so not getting typically the highest quality of looks. There's a lot more jumpers in his shot diet and things like that. And as I mentioned, I do think the decision-making is the driving force. That I think Nick Nurse, he's talked about it plenty in post-games. This has been one of the reigning themes of his overall talks with the media is making smart decisions, valuing each possession. That's something that is clearly very appealing to him. I think that's a large reason why Kyle Lowry is being trusted to run the reins and run this offense for the Sixers team since he's come. Tyrese Maxey is not a guy who's very turnover-prone and largely is very good in the way that he takes care of the ball. But beyond that, there's been some issues. There's guys that have not quite lived up to that standard that Nick Nurse looks like he's trying to set. And as we mentioned, that Jeff Dowtin leading the G League in assist-to-turnover ratio in his 16-game played. He also listed Allen Iverson as his favorite player growing up, which I do think, good brownie points there. Any shout-out to AI is a huge hit with the fan base, of course. And another guy that has become a huge hit with the fan base that I want to talk a little bit about is Ricky Council IV. He's obviously still on a two-way deal. He's made his presence felt every opportunity that he has been on the floor. Some ridiculous slams, the effort level, the intensity that he plays with. And I personally have led the charge saying how I want Ricky Council to be upgraded to a true roster spot. And the Sixers have yet to do that. So there was an awesome article that dropped on Liberty Ballers by Brian Toparik, who's my go-to source for all the salary cap information, and I think should be everyone's. He's a guy who knows the ins and outs like very few do in the industry. And he talked a little bit about why this has not happened yet. What is the holdup from the Sixers side of things? So I did want to bring this up here, some of the finances. So, and Brian writes, quote, "Thanks to their maneuvering at the February 8th NBA trade deadline, the Sixers were roughly $2.1 million below the luxury tax line after signing Kyle Lowry to a $2.8 million rest-of-season contract shortly before the All-Star break. Baisley's 10-day contract cost them around $120,000, which leaves them around $1.975 million under the tax line for now. The Sixers didn't spend a second-round pick to salary dump Daniel House Jr. just to go back into the tax after the trade deadline, though. If they stay out of the tax this year, they'll ensure that they can't be subject to the repeater tax, which spiked in the new CBA, until the 2027 to 2028 season at the earliest. Rest of season minimum contracts are decreasing in value roughly $11,600 per day from now until the end of the season. If the Sixers sign someone to such a deal on Monday, March 4th today, it would cost them nearly $490,000. If they wait until the following Monday, it would be around only $405,000. Rest of season minimum deals will only further decrease in value from there. The Sixers can go only 2 weeks at a time with only 13 players on standard contracts, not counting players on two-way deals. They'll have to sign someone either to a 10-day contract or a rest of season deal between now and March 14th. But they're nearly $2 million under the tax line, and the rest of season contract will cost them less than $5,000. So what's the holdup? And to answer that question, kind of that conversation, is he talked a lot about the incentives in Buddy Hield's contract, how that is having an impact on the cap because it's less of a hard number, and that there are some factors or milestones that he must hit, one of them being getting past the second round, one of them being among the league leaders in three-pointers made, all these things that he's looking likely to hit or on pace to hit. So the number that was sold as the salary cap number is going to end up a little higher, and that's feeding into all these conversations. And the other side of things that I wanted to bring up for Ricky Council specifically is if this is a guy who's seeking more than a minimum contract, which frankly I get the argument for, that he has shined enough as a guy that is still up and coming, very young, and a guy that I believe is going to turn out to be a very solid NBA basketball player. When you think about how these contract works, that I've referred to it as the Sam Hinkie special, that it does work for both sides. When you think about a guy like Shake Milton, I'll use the example, that he signed a 4-year deal worth just under $7 million when he was a second-round pick, did not have a guaranteed contract coming out of the draft. So for Shake Milton, that was a sign of security, that you got a 4-year contract, you're guaranteed to make over $6 million in the NBA, and you have enough time to carve out a role beyond that. hasn't quite worked out for Shake. He did sign a 2-year, $10 million deal this offseason, so got paid a little bit more. And not that you're complaining about that type of money by any means, but he hasn't a guy that has, I guess, leaped forward in his development in the way I think many hoped. For Ricky Council IV, he probably has a little stronger belief. And why I bring up the minimum conversation is minimum deals are the only ones that can be prorated for this season. If he wants a long-term deal above the minimum, then that's something that's going to extend, and you're not going to make back the money which you kind of quote-unquote have earned already this year. Now, he's still being paid. He's on the two-way contract. It's not like he's working for free or playing basketball for free. These guys are all doing quite fine, but I do think if he's trying to maximize his earnings, which is likely the goal for all of these guys, it's probably best to continue pushing this, not sign with the Sixers this season, or at least wait till the offseason. So we will see. I don't love that tactic because I just frankly want these Sixers to make sure no team has a chance to swoop in and grab him at a higher price point, or just period, because I want him a part of the Sixers. But we'll see how things shake out from there. And the other part that I will note here is this also from Brian. Liberty Ballers' own Paul Hudrick recently laid out a convincing case for why Ricky Council IV is deserving as one of those open roster spots. You'll find no argument to the contrary here, but the Sixers' proximity to the tax line might cause them to wait on converting Council until closer to the end of the regular season. As long as they do it by April 14th, he'd be eligible to play in the playoffs. As much as it'd be great to see Council rewarded for how he's played of late, the Sixers have no financial incentive to do so right now. In fact, the uncertainty surrounding some of Hield's incentives might be the main reason why they're holding on for the time being. Now, I don't want to be the guy that is sticking up for the owners, ducking the tax, that you don't hang any banners for the amount of money saved. That is not why you own a sports franchise. But I will say there is some sort of logic here, that the repeater tax is something that's punished and it multiplies, that when you do it year in and year out, the cost goes up, the number goes up, and you look like a team like a Golden State Warriors who are making or spending more in the luxury tax than any other team by more than double. Like you can add up the rest of the league and it still barely stacks up to the Warriors. It's pretty ridiculous because that's how deep they've gone in the margins. Now, granted, they got 4 championships over the past couple years, so you got to give and take there. The Sixers obviously don't have either of those things, but I guess my point being here that I'm just sticking up saying it's not just to be penny pinching and playing cheap, that there is some sort of strategy to this as far as extending and making sure you're not dipping into that number until it truly benefits the team, because you're only punishing yourself more in the long term. But overall, it is a good sign the Sixers continue to work to add young talent. That guys like Jeff Dowtin Jr. are constantly being cycled. It feels like they continue to look like the bright mix of young players, and maybe they found it yet, maybe they have not. It's very clear that there is still work to be done. There is still two open roster spaces as the Baisley contract has expired, so we will see how things shake out from there. We will have a couple new videos coming out on the players when the Sixers do make these decisions, but overall, the vibes are high with this team. They're showing some signs of life, and I'll have another video dropping the latest Joel Embiid injury update coming out later tonight. So stay posted for that. Make sure you guys are subscribing to the channel to keep Sixers Digest growing. Drop a like and let me know your comments on Jeff Dowtin Jr. What's your level of optimism for how he can perform on this team, what he can bring, and I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.